Weissberg grew up in Haifa. He has spent most of his adult life traveling the world, most recently to Iraq, and before that, Saudi Arabia. I wanted you all to hear what he has to say about it. Ted Weissberg, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well. It's going well. How are you?
Good, thank you. How was teaching today?
Kids were good. Kids were
Yeah.
good.
So tell me again where you teach and what you do exactly.
So I'm a paraprofessional at District D214 for their life skills program for kids in ninth to 12th grade that have cognitive disabilities.
And what do you do in that capacity?
I do everything from assisting teachers with instructional content to helping students feed, toilet, uh go behavioral, academic.
How'd
uh,
you land there in that field of work?
it was after my traumatic brain injury. I was about a year into Culver's and I was looking for a job, and my friend told me, why don't you be a para? You have some experience working in after school programming. And I was placed at Wilmette Junior High in their self-contained room. And the kid that I worked with at the time, I really enjoyed working with, as challenging as he was. And I've always liked high school kids, so I just switched to the high school level.
And you found it really rewarding.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm never
Well,
bored. Never bored.
well, so we're going to come back to that because I got to get to why I wanted to bring you onto
Yeah,
this
yeah.
because you freaking amaze me in a variety of ways. I'm going to come back to later about how you changed my whole approach to bar and bat mitzvah and hakafa, which I've never talked to you about. But I want to start with this crazy thing you've started doing, which isn't really crazy. It's more I admire you. You made a decision that you wanted to see the world. So you started traveling years ago and it's taken you all over. And I
It
want to get
has.
specifically to the fact that this winter break you went to Iraq and last year to Saudi Arabia as a Jewish man doing that. Every time I tell people, I can't get the words out because I can't believe it. I want to back up though. Where did this love of travel? Why are you doing this?
So I started to travel on my own during 2014, and I would like go visit friends in New York, or me and a buddy would go down to New Orleans or whatever. And that sort of got the ball started. And I sort of figured out, like, oh, if you go by yourself, there's no stress because you can do exactly what you want. And then before we started recording this, I earlier today I was looking through and I was like, well, what got me to that point? And I found the YouTube channel that convinced me, because 4 years ago I had a visa to Pakistan.
Why?
And so there's a YouTuber, and he's not active anymore, but he makes incredible content. I want to make sure I get this right. It's called College Free USA. And this kid, he's a polyglot, and he bought a tuk-tuk, which is like those little carts. They have them in India,
Right.
Bangladesh, all by different names. In Thailand, they have it too. And he drove from the southernmost point, so Karachi, Pakistan, all the way to the China border
And it's in a tuk tuk.
in a tuk-tuk. He faced multiple challenges, and so he sort of started this idea that, okay, you can go places that the media has basically destroyed, Western media has destroyed, and in most cases you will be fine. And so
In
his
most
video,
cases, you'll be. That's so reassuring.
uh but he so I saw that, and so I was like, okay, I'll go to Pakistan. And then COVID hit, and it canceled my Pakistan trip. So
But
that
prior to
was the
that, you
start
weren't.
of that.
But you were not starting with Pakistan, though. You had been to New Zealand, Australia. You had been throughout Asia,
Yeah.
right? And then you had also been at a number of the other stans, right?
So Pakistan was the original stan that I
Okay.
was going to start in. Um, after COVID lifted, I was planning to go to Ukraine. I got interested through in Soviet history through a YouTube channel called Bald and Bankrupt. I started learning Russian. Unfortunately, during that time, right after I bought my plane ticket, Putin put 200,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, and he went into Ukraine, canceling my trip. And so I was watching Bald and Bankrupt one day, and he was in Uzbekistan. And I thought, well, I could go there and do that. And so I did 14 days in Uzbekistan with a tour agency and had quite an experience. And, speaking horrible Russian.
But what does somebody do by themselves for 14 days in Uzbekistan?
Well, so this tour company, what I liked about them is like they were only with me for like 5 to 7 hours. And then I was sort of on my own in different sit in Tashkent, in Bukhara, in Hiva. And so I just would wander around these cities
Hmm.
and, I would try speaking Russian and seeing how much I could understand. The best way to practice the language is hang out with the taxi drivers because they talk. Taxi drivers talk in other countries. And so I'd take taxi rides and practice Russian because most of these guys didn't know English. And it was a very simplistic conversation. And yeah, it was
So
great.
they appreciated you for trying to speak Russian?
Yeah. The best story I have, I think I was either, yeah, I must have been back in Tashkent, and I went to, they call them cafeterias. And essentially it's like your school lunchroom, and usually a family runs it. You sit with all sorts of people, and there was this guy that you introduce yourself to who's ever at the table, and me and this guy sat there, and it was a mix of his bad English, my bad Russian, charades, and Google. And we had this incredible conversation. I got to learn about, he has Iranian history,
Hmm.
and now he's in Uzbekistan. And uh, he ended up paying for my meal. And
Well,
he didn't tell me that he did this. And so when I tried to pay, they said the guy before you paid because you were just willing to sit there and chat with him.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in Uzbekistan, and then the other stands that you've been to are
I've been then what was it? Last summer I did Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan.
okay.
And that was all, it was a 20-day trip through three stands. Uh Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have the most, and this is when I started filming because well, it was actually previous to that. I went to Saudi and Jordan, and I had a student that told me you should have a TV show. And I was like, I'd be willing to film little 2-minute clips. And the whole class got behind this. And so I wandered around Saudi Arabia, Jordan with a little, I think it's FDRX 3000 action cam, and I made these little stories, and I started enjoying the editing process. And it's a puzzle just to figure out how, you'll get 20 gig of footage, and then you have a puzzle of, well, how do I make a story out of this?
So people, where do people see these on YouTube? What do they have to subscribe
Uh,
to? What's it called?
so if you go to youtube.com/at Teddy W 1990,
Mhm.
you can find it.
Okay, so let's go back. We're gonna get to Saudi Arabia and
Okay.
Jordan. Let's stay with. So you've been to four stands,
I've been to every stand besides Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan.
and your goal is to get through all the stands.
I am committed at this point to somehow figuring out how to get into all the stands.
So you're committed to getting into Afghanistan right now.
As they would say, inshallah, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Okay, and in traveling the stands, what has stuck out to you about their similarities, their differences, how they view you as an American? What have you seen as trends as you've done this?
So, so here's the interesting part. In all the stands that I've gone to, Americans make the assumption that if it is a stan, it is just like Afghanistan, and that is not true. You have to remember that Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan were all part of the Soviet Union. Yes, Islam is the majority religion nowadays, but they have a version of Islam that has this weird Soviet influence.
Hmm.
So it's very different in comparison to other Islamic countries. Uzbekistan, for instance, they do not allow in major cities the call to prayer. They have all these electronic clock boards, and it announces what times are the prayer times.
You think that's a
Um,
Soviet thing that they're not allowed to announce it?
yeah, because when the Soviet Union came through it, they destroyed a lot of Islam, and then it was held in secret, like many religions do when
Yeah.
another country comes and conquers. And now it's on the revival, but the Uzbek president is really playing a line between, okay, I'm going to allow Islam, but I also want to keep good relations with Russia and the West.
Hmm. Okay. So, other trends that you saw between them, do the stands get along? Do they like each other?
So that's complicated. Uh Kazakhstan seems to sort of get along with everyone around it.
Hmm.
They do have a universal dislike for the Chinese government, who has now become more active in the region
Hmm.
because Russia has backed off because they're focusing in Ukraine. Um, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan do not get along.
Hmm.
They had border skirmishes 3 months before I went. When so I was in Kyrgyzstan. They have no relationship with Tajikistan. They have
Hmm.
border skirmishes that have been breaking out for 20 years over certain regions.
But you were
So,
allowed to travel between them even though they don't have
no,
relations. No.
I
Okay.
had to go into uh that valley. There's a valley in that basically Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, I think Afghanistan sort of all share. So I went to this rural part of Uzbekistan. I spent a night. It was boring, and then I was able to go into Tajikistan because Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan don't get along.
And you did this by yourself.
I had a tour
Yeah.
agents. I mean, I do have guides throughout here because I'm not going to drive in a foreign
Of course.
country.
Of
I
course.
barely like driving in the U.S.
But there is an element of you being an American and Jewish, by the way. We'll come to that as well. Going to all these countries by yourself, turning yourself over to the fate of a tour guide, and ending up in some pretty crazy places, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. I end up in some weird situations.
Okay, so you've done all of have you done all the Asian countries?
No, still have Japan. I still have Laos. I still have Myanmar. I mean,
Okay, okay. So but
I,
you've
I,
been to where have you been then? You've been to Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia,
Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore,
not North
and
Korea.
no.
Okay,
North Korea, I have no interest in
thank God.
because, well, it's because there's no culture. It's all
Right,
curated.
right.
All the places I go to, they do have a pride of their culture and wanting people to interact.
Yeah. All right, so keep going with the Asian countries. I interrupted you.
Indonesia, I think that's all of them. I haven't been to mainland China. Uh, yeah. Oh, and Thailand, obviously.
And you're only 33 years old.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so again, before we get to the Saudi and Iraq, Algeria stuff, what have you gotten out of all this different travel, seeing the world? What is it? How has it changed your perspective?
We're all people. Uh,
That's so trite. That's so
well,
trite.
it is, but
That's like a bad sermon.
yeah, well, um, but there's a difference between the government and the people.
Hmm.
And the best trips that I've gotten are places that are just totally different from me. And you have to go in and you can't judge. I learned that early on in Cambodia with their culture and in Vietnam. Uh, but
What do you mean by you can't judge? Say more about that.
just because they do something one way, we don't necessarily understand it in the West. For instance, in Saudi and Iraq, with how they dress, and particularly with women, we don't understand that. We see it as this is just men oppressing women. Technically, you can make a religious argument that they have with the Quran says that they need to cover in certain ways, but I don't judge Iraq less for that.
Even though, had you been a woman, you wouldn't have been able to do any of these countries on your own like you did as a man.
So both Saudi and Iraq would say you could go as a woman. For women, they say you would be okay. You have to dress conservatively. Even men have to dress conservatively.
Mhm.
For instance, this, I love concerts. I have many concert t-shirts. I do not bring any of those on my trip. Uh, I do not bring shorts on my trip. Uh, Most of these countries, especially with a Islamic background, uh, they do not view shorts in a positive light. I don't understand why, especially when it's 90 degrees out.
Hmm.
But it's just something that I've sort of accepted.
There must be by now, since you're such a seasoned traveler, and it's probably pretty easy for you because you know the process and everything. When you see other American tourists, do they, in any of these, not that you see so many in Saudi or Iraq or any of these places, do you look at them and just go, what are you thinking?
No, I let's see. I'm trying to think where I've run into other Americans. I think in Kazakhstan I did, and I wasn't surprised
Mhm.
because Kazakhstan does so much with oil and gas. Um, in Iraq, I did not. My joke is you will always meet Australians. Australians go everywhere.
Yeah.
Germans are everywhere. The French seem to also show up a lot. And then like Czech will also appear. But I in my last besides Kazakhstan, I don't run into Americans.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I also like the commitment to the lie that my tour guides say. The
Which is
two
what?
lies that they always tell me is we have great internet and we get plenty of Americans.
Oh, okay. So, I want to. I also want to find out. Let me ask this first before we get to Saudi and Iraq. Uh, you you like local food? You have to have a pretty good stomach.
Yeah, I get sick every trip. I get to I got hit in Kyrgyzstan with minor food poisoning. Tajikistan, I got hit and it took me out for a day where I had to basically say, I gotta, we're
Mm,
not going anywhere. Luckily, I was in the capital.
mm.
Uh, the Middle East, so Jordan, I was fine. Saudi, I was fine. And then I got sick, but I was in Turkey, and I'm convinced it was the Istanbul airport food that got me sick. I do not think Iraq or Algeria got me sick.
So, which country or which place to where you've been has had the best food experience for you?
Iraq,
Yeah.
Iraq has some of the best food. Uh, I mean, it's just
Okay, what's the weirdest, what's the strangest thing you've eaten?
Uh, let's see. Cambodia holds that because of the bugs. I think most people that would listen would think tarantula, cricket. They have a form of cicada.
Mm.
They have these snakes that you eat that there's not much meat,
How was a
but
tarantula?
if done correctly, it's not bad. If overcooked, it's very dry. It's like eating a hard-boiled egg, the yellow part,
Uh-huh.
and it's just like sand.
Okay. All right.
Saudi, they had a big obsession with the intestines of the goat and the eyeball. I, I was in Abha, which to give people reference is about 200 kilometers from the Yemen border. And it's also, according to the State Department, a level 4, but I found out it was because of a terrorist attack in 2015.
Mm.
And they have not revisited Abha since then.
Mm. And so you ate intestine there or eyeball there?
Intestine and goat eye, yeah.
How'd it taste?
I The intestines weren't bad. It was like tripe, it wasn't bad. The eye, the driver slash tour guide I had, who was a crotchety old man, gave a great tour. Hated everything. Uh, he loved the eyeball of the goat. He's like, this is the best part.
Okay. So you went to Jordan. Let's talk. Last year you went to Jordan and then Saudi.
Yeah, during Christmas time.
Talk to us about that.
So Jordan, I knew was like the less crowd, and this is gonna annoy a lot of people. It's the less crowded version of Israel. um, I knew that there wouldn't be as many Americans, the chances were lower.
Yeah.
Um,
You haven't been to Israel, right?
no, that has to go last on my list. I have to
Okay.
reverse to it because
Okay.
there's enough countries that,
That won't take the passport. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Though Israel might not allow me in given my travel history, so.
All right, but continue. I'm sorry. So you Jordan because it was like the light Israel in terms of tourists. All right, keep
Yeah, in
going.
terms of tourists, I thought it was a good place to start in the Middle East. Then they are, I mean, they have Americans that come through, and for a while the U.S. has had good relations. Petra's historic, it's a beautiful site.
Hmm.
So I decided to do that, and then what was it like 3 weeks before? A buddy of mine went to. We've always had this joke about going to Saudi Arabia. And I saw something on the internet that Saudi has an e-visa, and I added it on last minute.
Hmm.
And it was a 6-day trip into Saudi.
And
Saudi's incredible. Don't go to Dubai.
have
I
you been to
read.
Dubai? You haven't been
No,
to Dubai.
I've been to their airport, and I hate
Okay.
their airport.
Okay. So say more about Saudi.
So Saudi,
American Jewish single male goes to Saudi for vacation. Go ahead.
okay. So I I have horrible luck at Canadian airports and in the US. I'm always pulled aside for extra search. I've almost been detained twice in Canada for being a solo male traveler. And I think the US at visa to Pakistan for 2 years, I was sort of haunted by that thing. Um, but I got into Saudi no problem. They're like, "Oh, it's your first time," and the guard was very welcoming. I had a great guide in Riyadh. This guy was awesome. So I was at Petra when it flooded. That big storm that came through.
Dangerous. That's
It,
dangerous.
yeah. I was right outside of the military came in along with the police and they blocked it off. So I stuck at a store right outside of Petra
On the way in or the way out?
on the way into Petra.
So you didn't even get into Petra.
No, I was like in a store that goes down into the canyon.
Okay.
So my clothes were wrecked.
Hmm.
And so like I asked my guide, I said, is there a place I can go do laundry? He goes, give me your laundry. I was like, dude, you really don't want to do this. Like, it's just gross. He's like, no, 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 it's my job. I give it
Mhm.
to him. He got it dry cleaned for me.
Wow.
And then I tried to pay him and he wouldn't take it. But Riyadh is an incredible place. I had I went to so Saudi, they have coffees, their big thing. Like at 10 o'clock at night, they're like, let's go get a coffee. It's like, I gotta sleep, man. They're like, yeah. But it's very modern and just like cars would stop. I was waiting for an Uber and three different cars pulled aside. They said, cancel your Uber. I'll take you. I
Huh.
was like, yeah, my Uber's 2 minutes away. I'll pass.
You didn't trust them.
I didn't. Yeah, there
Yeah.
was a part of me that didn't trust it, and also I was like, it's my first day. This is a
Yeah.
lot.
Smart. 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 All right. So you did Riyadh, and then you went to. You said what was the name of the town?
Abha,
Apa.
I went to Abha, and Abha is green. That's the thing that threw me because
Hmm.
I think in the U.S. we have this picture. Saudi is all desert, and there's camels everywhere. I didn't see any camels in Saudi, which was interesting.
You saw
But
none, really?
I
None?
no, I saw a bunch in Jordan.
Hmm.
Uh, and Abha was the one that I was most nervous about just because of the misinformation about the State Department. But it ended up being, as grouchy as my guide was, he took me through these abandoned sites of old fortresses. And it was just incredible.
Hmm.
And then we ended in Jeddah, and Jeddah. So Jeddah, I got the Four Seasons Hotel. They have a one in Saudi and in Jeddah, and I guess the Saudi government decided we like what the Four Season has, so we're gonna buy part of it. And so there's all these signs that say no filming, so I wasn't filming. I thought I was out of the region, and I wasn't. And so from the rooftop, this guard with like a Kalichnikov or an AK bends over. He goes, "No filming."
Oh,
And I was
geez.
like, "Turn off, unscrew, in pocket. Sorry." He goes, "No problem, my friend."
So, having experienced Saudi, you're like, where could I go that's even potentially more dangerous? Okay, I'm going to go to Algeria, and then when I'm in Algeria, I'm going to hop over to Iraq for a little bit.
So I didn't see Algeria as dangerous.
No, but Iraq, I'm talking about.
Yeah, Iraq. So Iraq was originally on my list of countries I never thought I could go to. And a buddy of mine and his buddy, and they're both Jews, went to Iraq without a guide for 8 days, and they don't speak Arabic. And all throughout the trip, I was texting them because I wanted every detail.
Yeah.
And they came away from this trip and they said the most dangerous thing is the food and crossing the street.
Hmm.
So they got hit with severe food poisoning. One of the reasons I like guides is they can tell you where the good street food is, so you're safe. They can tell you which restaurants are good
Hmm.
versus not. Like there was times in Iraq where I saw a place that looked good. My guy goes, "No, we're not going there." Uh, they
Oh.
don't. He saw signs that it was not a safe eat.
So, you speak a little Arabic.
I speak like 5 words of Arabic.
Okay, but that impresses them.
Yeah,
So what did you like so much about Iraq besides the food?
the people. I mean,
Well,
it was amazing to me because I was like, the Iraqi people have every right to not be nice to an American. I mean, we were in their country since the 90s. You could argue even in the 80s with funding them during the Iran-Iraq war. So we've been around that long. We killed, I think the estimates are 1 to 2 million Iraqis during the war. It might be higher. Uh, so I really wasn't sure. I was like, they might be nice. They could also be mean. And everyone was friendly.
Hmm. Was that
Um,
cultural, or did you sense that it was genuine?
no, it was genuine. Like the one experience I had was someone found out I was American. He rolled his eyes and walked away. But it wasn't a big deal. Like they're like, "Oh, you're from America," and they were more curious about Chicago than anything else.
Hmm.
Michael Jordan still lives, is what that's really the biggest takeaway. No matter where you go, Michael Jordan still lives. Um, but no, it was genuine. Like we were in Babylon, and most Iraqis, they do like three things for work. And so this guy was a farmer. He ran a restaurant outside in his backyard. And so we went over, we had this great meal, and he brought out dates. And dates in the Gulf Arab world, I would say, are the best in the world.
Hmm.
I would also say for honey that they might also have the
Or
best.
date honey, yeah.
And so he brought out this little tray of dates with honey on it. I was munching, and he comes over to me and goes, "You like?" I was like, "Yeah, it's delicious." And he goes, "You want some to go?" I was like, "Sure." And he comes back in like 10 minutes with a 5-pound bag. It was in a garbage bag, essentially. It was a garbage bag. And he goes, "Here." So I go to my guide and I said, "This guy just gave me 5 pounds of dates, and I don't know how much this costs." And my guy goes, "It's free. It's a
Hmm.
gift. You can't pay him. It will be seen as rude."
Wow.
Um, and that was mind blowing. Also at the hotel, like I got a meal.
Wait. But you did not eat 5 pounds of dates. God forbid.
No, I did not. Uh, I did not eat 5 pounds of dates, though
Okay.
they were really good. And if you
Okay.
get a Rocky dates, I encourage you to eat them.
Okay.
Um,
Back at the
but
hotel. Go ahead.
even at the hotel, like I was, I had money in my room. I didn't bring all of it down, and so I was at their restaurant because it was like the day I got in, and I got in at like 2 a.m. into Baghdad, and then I was eating later that day, and I was short like by a few dinar, and so I was like, "Oh, I have to run up to my room and get more money." The guy goes, "Don't worry about it. We
Hmm.
don't care. It's a few dinar."
What's the exchange rate?
Let me see.
Approximately. You don't have to give me the exact. Like 100 dinar to the dollar, or 1,000, or
I want
10,
to
or
say it's like 100 Iraqi dinar to the
okay.
dollar.
That's it. So that makes sense then. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was in Algeria that you told your tour guide that you were Jewish,
I did not tell him that.
because he showed you Jewish names. I found on that one.
He showed me Jewish names. Yeah, no, it's 1,309 Iraqi dinar to $1.
Okay, so a few dinar is
Yeah.
nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about, he must have assumed you were Jewish by your name. What? I mean,
No. And I've ran into this before. I saw it in Uzbekistan because they actually used to have Jews in Uzbekistan, I think in Bukhara. Um, so we were at a World War One memorial, and at this time, Algeria was colonized by France. The Algerians will tell you that the French brought the Jews.
brought the
But
Jews?
yeah,
Okay.
that any Jews were brought with the French.
Okay.
I don't really understand how that works, but I was like, all right.
He just told you that. He didn't, as a tour guide, he just mentioned that to you.
Well, we were at a World War One memorial, and he goes, "This is how Algeria is diverse." And he goes, "These are Jews, these are Italians,
Uh,
and they all fought in the name of Algeria during World War One."
okay.
And so I asked him, and you'll see it in the video. I just said, "So what happened to all the Jews of Algeria nowadays?" And he goes, "They converted," uh, which I did not realize would set off on my YouTube channel. Like, at no point was I making a pro or anti-Jewish. I was making an observation,
Uh-huh.
and the comment section blew up about Jews in Algeria.
What about?
Uh, some of them were just they didn't like Jews.
Hmm.
Other people were explaining like, oh, it's because of the French we had Jews. We
So
were always,
A bunch of Algerians were commenting.
yeah. I think the majority of my following right now on YouTube is from Algeria.
Positive.
That got me a bunch of views and subscribers, so yeah.
Okay.
I only respond to the good comments. I have removed a few just because I was like, that's just unnecessary.
Wow. Anti-Semitic or just
They were either trolls, and you can tell when someone's a troll, or it just was hate filled.
hmm.
So I just removed it.
So I think I'm gonna ask this question a second time, or maybe I was just thinking it. As an American and as a Jew, the decision to go in these spaces is a little crazy. I mean, I
Mhm.
love getting together with you because I love living vicariously through you in these experiences. But take this in the positive way. What are you
Mhm.
thinking?
So so a lot of these countries, the problem they have is with Israel. That's their problem. It's not as much the Jewish Americans themselves. Um, and as I say that, I've also never disclosed it.
Hmm.
When they ask where your last name comes from, I always say German. It got me into some trouble in Tajikistan because they tried speaking German to me. And I said, no, all my ancestors left Germany in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's
but
reasonable.
yeah, so that's sort of how you deal with it. Also, my connection to Judaism is not strong. So I think it's possible that I just don't identify as Jewish
Hmm.
that much. The American part, I mean, I was born in America. Like that's how the cookie crumbled.
Mm.
Born in America. The things I never sit there, I wouldn't wear a political shirt to any of these countries. Um,
You're smart.
I yeah, I'm very respectful. I mostly listen. So whenever people talk about America, I listen. I also am willing to admit the faults that I see in America, specifically in foreign policy.
Mhm.
And so it throws people because they think all Americans will defend America in every way. And that's not true. It's not true for me. Like I had Iraqis ask me, what did you think of the invasion? And I told them, I said, I disagreed. Iraq was not a threat to the US
Mhm.
in 2003.
All right, so we're going to back up a little bit more. Yes, you claim that's condescending. I apologize. You have never thought of yourself as having a strong Jewish identity,
Yeah.
and yet,
And y-
since sixth grade, from sixth grade to 12th grade, you and I got together, if not every month, like 5 times, 6 times, 7 times a year, just the
yeah.
two of us, to talk and to
Yeah.
reflect. I'm a rabbi.
And how many times have we talked about Judaism in those
A lot of
reflections?
times, but we talked a lot about stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff we talked about. Look, you're right. You were really unique as a kid in
Uh-huh.
that you were a deep thinker and you were always interested in politics and in international relations. And as a
Uh-huh.
kid, you would read books and all that stuff. And we would get together and talk books and talk
Yeah.
politics and I always brought up Jewish stuff in there.
Okay.
You don't remember that, but I always brought up
Okay.
Jewish
Yeah.
stuff, not as this is Jewish, but the
Uh-huh.
conversations we were having were Jewish.
Yeah.
Right? And your bar mitzvah was really what we became less formulaic
Mm-hmm.
because of you.
Yeah.
That you really wanted to become a bar mitzvah because of your learning style. You couldn't pick up the language. You weren't
Yeah.
getting the blessings, but it was really important for for your family, for you to do this. Do you
Yeah.
remember your bar mitzvah?
I do. I
So what did
do.
you? What do you remember? What you did?
I gave a long speech. Well, no, my correction. My dad gave the long speech. I don't know if it still holds Hakafah records. I mean, it's been a while since I was 13.
Yeah, but what did you do?
But we did the transliteration for the Torah, and I gave a speech about America and freedom and individualness and coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So why did I let you do that?
because you're the best rabbi around.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that's what I wanted everyone to hear. No, but why did I let you do that?
because and I actually I've used this example. Both you and I would say Azrui, and I'm surprised that I'm actually saying this, uh, have a big thing that Judaism is a community, a family, and it's cultural. It's not just a religion.
Okay. And what was your speech about? Individualism and freedom?
Freedom, family.
So this whole idea of what you made me see in a
Hmm.
lot of ways was we need to allow you to express yourself in this space, and you need to see that we support that as a
Yeah,
Jewish expression.
yeah.
And so I changed how we do Divrei Torah after that, how
Hmm.
we do the speeches. And
Okay.
I really appreciated, even at a young age, your commitment to understanding your truth.
Hmm. Thank you.
So talk to me about what your truth is.
My truth.
Yeah, what's your truth, do you think?
That's a deep philosophical question there.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from, but go ahead. What's because you express it in how you've lived. You've lived a
Yeah.
very unique life, right?
I for part of it, I think it's just and this was true with Row Cipher, the performing arts that I used to do in college, is I always like to go to places people say you can't or you shouldn't go.
Yeah. Where
Uh
was
my
that? No, back up a second. I was about to mention it.
uh
What's it? Where did you go?
so I went all over the south and west side of Chicago, um, all the way down into the wild hundreds to Dalton to all
To do
sorts of
what? To
places.
do what?
To do spoken word poetry.
Why?
Uh, so that's a whole nother story. I started attending with Roberto, these open ciphers they used to run in Humboldt Park. And I just went along because I like shows. But he's like, it's like 5 hours. You should write something, just try it, you know?
Mhm.
And then when I switched from Ripon to Roosevelt, I needed to make friends, and most people join a school club or whatever. I created a whole thing that was an open mic series that started at Roosevelt. And as that happened, I realized I needed to perform to fill time occasionally.
Uh-huh.
And it was a good way for me to express myself. So to learn, the mentors that I had were all from the South and West Side, and they said if you really want to learn spoken word, you have to go to the South and West Side.
So slam poetry, spoken word poetry,
Hmm.
taking you to spaces that people wouldn't expect you to go. So you were saying how this is part of your truth that you went to places where people would never expect you to go. Say more.
Yeah. And it's in those places you learn a lot about yourself. And the thing that I encourage people to do, which is what I did, is I didn't talk much.
Mhm.
I listened. And I used poetry as a way to gain entrance into the community. Phnom always calls it my passport
Mm.
into different cultures. Because on the outside they couldn't relate to a kid that wore metal t-shirts and stuff. But when they heard me do a poem, they realized, oh, okay, we can connect on that basis.
So you said, what did you learn about yourself?
I grew up in a very different climate, culture. As much as the South and West Side get publicized for violence, I would say in a lot of ways, compared to the North Shore, they have a stronger sense of community.
Say more. I couldn't agree with you more, but
Uh,
say more.
um, the sense of community between, like, and I see this at poetry sets, like, kids would be there, their parents wouldn't, but the neighbor would be there.
Mm.
And they would always make sure people would get home safe. And They always help people out, and this goes to my travel also. In these countries where people don't have a ton of money, they always make sure that you're okay.
Mm.
Uh, and that was incredible.
So that's what you learned about them. What did you learn
Mhm.
about yourself?
I think it's my ability to, even if I don't agree or necessarily even understand, I have a curiosity to try. Try and understand, okay, well, this is why this person believes this, or, you know, and that a lot of times what you hear versus what you can experience is very different.
How's your mom feel about all this?
So she always liked the spoken word. She wasn't thrilled with the South and West Side.
Yeah.
Saudi, she was really annoyed, and Iraq, she was really annoyed. She wasn't crazy about Uzbekistan and that region. She wasn't thrilled with Tajikistan because I think I spent like 8 days there or something, and 5 of those days were on the Afghan border. Like, we were driving, there's a river that separates Tajikistan and Afghanistan.
Mm.
It's not, it's like 7 Lake Avenues wide.
It's too bad you couldn't go to the other side of the river for a second just to say you made it to Afghanistan.
I know. And we're driving along one day, and my driver and guy go, Taliban, Taliban. And so I was like, how can you tell? Because I just saw a Toyota truck.
Yeah.
And they go, it's the truck. And this truck must have followed us for 3, 4 miles
Uh,
on the other side of the river as we're going along.
wow. Well, that's frightening.
Yeah. Though it really, and I didn't learn this until it was, my guide would always like, I go for walks and my guide's like, be careful. But she never explained that we were in a landmine zone.
I'm sorry. Oh
Like,
my God,
and
Ted.
so she told
Oh my
me,
God,
like,
Ted. Oh my
she told me,
God.
like, we're now out of the landmine zone. I was like, why did you tell me this when we started? She
God.
goes, well, it's mostly demined. Like, it's mostly fine. But and then
I'm
I
just thinking of
realized,
this little 8-year-old kid I knew when you were 8 years old is now walking in an area that's a landmine zone.
and so I had this picture of a landmine warning in Tajik.
Oh my God. Oh,
And I
so
realized, I was like, oh, I've seen those signs all over.
I really admire. I admire your sense of adventure. I admire your inquisitiveness and your need to know. But what I admire most about you in all this is you do this with such a humility. Yeah, you have your video channel, but you still do
Mhm.
that with humility.
Yeah,
You understand that it's not about you. So
yeah,
and you, no one would look when looking at you would, you're unassuming. No one would know that you've
yeah,
had these experiences. You've had this kind of growth that they could never imagine doing.
yeah.
uh, I think it's just really admirable, and I love the
Thank
fact
you.
that you've got the map behind you. It reminds me of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory
Yep.
and his
And the
flagstone.
flags. Well, so that's one of the things. So the tourism boards don't, well, I don't really know this, but they don't like me because I don't buy things that normal tourists buy.
Yeah, yeah,
I only buy flags, maps, magnets.
yeah.
And so in Algeria, I got a flag, and it's a normal size flag. And so in Iraq, my tour, Algeria, we're gonna get you a better one. I was like, all right, like, this is a pretty standard sized flag, but if you're determined, like, I'm not, I'm not gonna stop you.
Well, you don't get real size flags; you get little flags, right?
No, no, no.
You
Well,
get the real flags.
I'll get real size, I'll get miniature, and then Iraq topped it with a 9 foot by 9 foot Iraqi flag that I have.
You bought that, or they gave it to you?
Well, I bought it. It was like $20, and it's a 9 foot by 9 foot flag.
Are these hanging anywhere in your house, in your apartment?
I'm having trouble hanging the Iraqi flag. The only wall that's long enough and big enough, I would have to hang it on my ceiling.
Oh God! All right, so I'm gonna completely shift gears for a moment. We're coming toward the end of our time, but given the fact I just did another podcast with someone slightly younger than you. And so I think it's we touched upon this in terms of you deciding to go to Israel first or last. Israel will give you a very hard time with your passport. I'll tell you that much right now. What as a 33-year-old lightly identified Jewish person in America, what's your take on Israel Gaza? And how are you feeling about that? And the response in America?
So I see as both sides are guilty. They have both done things that they're in the wrong for. Both Israel, both Gaza. Um I also, from my travels, and it's not even that they've talked about Israel, but in Iraq with and Algeria, there's tribes are very big, and it was all drawn by Western powers.
Right.
Um, and I saw the same thing in Jordan and Saudi. Uh, you know,
Sykes-Picot. It was a Sykes-Picot agreement.
yeah,
That was between France and Britain.
yeah. Um, I, I've always been hesitant saying that we should fund Israel. I think they can survive militarily. They've proven it over multiple occasions that they can defeat these powers. But at the same time, you also look at how small Gaza is and the amount of damage they're doing. And so I see the arguments about, oh, okay, we should defund because in a way they're taking from Russia's playbook with Ukraine and with carpet bombing and all this other stuff. So the it's a very tough situation. But I see it as both sides have done a lot in the wrong, and I don't know how it would be solved. Um,
Where are you going next?
so as of right now, for winter break, I want to go back to Pakistan.
Or you want to go to Pakistan?
I want to go to Pakistan.
Yeah. Okay.
The tour company that I did Iraq through basically does every country that I want to go to.
Okay.
Which is all the countries that are in red on the US State Department website. And then I have a connection. There's a YouTuber named Fearless and Far, and he did this adventure through the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Oh God.
And so
That's the
there's
first African country you're gonna. Oh, you went to Algeria,
I
but
went to Algeria, please.
that's the second African country to which you're going to go.
It's the second largest. I'm going in order of landmass here. Come on now. And so I don't know if it's going to be possible. That would be in the summer of 2025. There's a lot in the Congo, with the politically, militarily, but there's a wonderful, and I I can send you this info. I have no clue how to pronounce the tour company. It's in their language, but it goes basically across the Congo. It's like 30 days or something.
Wow.
And you trek from Kinshasa, or I'm mispronouncing that probably, all the way to the other side of the Congo. And it's like 10 days by car, 10 days by possible motorbike or boat. I
So
mean, it's totally fascinated me.
okay. So my last question for you: Has all your travels to date, everywhere you've seen, I think I know the answer already.
Mhm.
Um, has it instilled with? Has it made you more hopeful, less hopeful, equally hopeful, whatever hope?
I have hope in the people. Um, I don't have hope in government. Uh, I think governments don't get along, but I think to encourage people to travel to go places that may even told you shouldn't, do your research. Everything I've seen from my experiences, people left alone, and when you remove the government factions and the military, we get along. And at the end of the day, that old saying, like, we're all human, it's true.
Hmm. Again, that's trite, but it works because
Yeah.
you've actually come to that conclusion. You have reinforced the triteness.
Uh, yeah. It's very true that
So you're hopeful for in terms of the people, but not the governments. Are you worried about the governments?
I think because, the few men in power, uh, both in the US, there's 535 that are in charge, then 70% are men or something. It's some high. And then you get to other countries like Russia, where it's Putin, China, it's Xi Jinping. Um, that's where I become unhopeful
Hmm.
because at one point it becomes a pissing contest
Hmm.
between countries.
But when you peel that all away, you know that we're just all basically the same.
Yeah, I
Unique.
think,
We're unique
yeah,
but the same.
if that whole idea that if you promote cultural and exchange and travel, I think we could get a lot further than diplomats could. Go eat a meal in Iraq and tell me that you don't love Iraq. Go eat a,
Amen.
go eat a meal in Saudi with some people and tell me you don't love Saudi.
I
Like,
would love to. I've wanted to go to Afghanistan forever. And I really hope someday. I've always wanted to go to Damascus. And I really wish that someday I'll be able to, but it doesn't look like at this point that that's going to be possible. But I
I
always
got
hope.
I got a tour company that they say they can get you in.
Ted, this has been fantastic. I could go on with you forever. I feel like this time has just blown by. So you got to promise me that you're going to keep having coffee with me every so often
Oh
and catching
yes,
up because I love spending the time with you. And I'm really glad that Hakafa got a chance to reconnect with you after all these years
yes,
because
yes.
it's just, you're amazing. And this has been a lot of
Thank you,
fun. So
thank
thank
you.
you. And with that, we'll pick it up next time. Thank you all for being here.